And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Thursday, August 22nd, 2024. And we start out with the sea ice. A lot of open water out here along the Arctic and Chukchi Sea coastlines. We do not see any major ice, though there are a few widely scattered icebergs across the Beaufort Sea down to off of Wainwright. The most notable shoreline ice pack ice still back out here toward eastern Russia along the Russian Arctic coast. That'll hold tight here through the weekend. We don't have any real push of cold air coming in with a north-northwest flow that would really cause that to move. Looking at the weather map, the pattern overall is going to turn cooler, more fall-like across the mainland. This secondary low will be pushing across the Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound as we go through late tonight, early on Friday morning. The remnants of Typhoon Ampel is already pulled up north of the Beaufort Sea, and we have a weak low linger in the northeastern Gulf with a trough off along the Panhandle coastline, and then this weak low near and south of the central Aleutians. That low will come eastward and pass toward just south of the Gulf on Saturday, but more importantly, we have a cold front that'll be pushing across the mainland on Friday, ushering in a cooler early fall-like feel, along with some areas of rain or rain showers in the interior. And as you get in the Brooks Range or Alaska Range, that will also include snow as you go up in elevation. And for Saturday, we find a secondary low kind of develops along that front over the northwestern Gulf, and it's just going to keep unstable conditions. Colder air aloft creates showery conditions. So again, some snows in the Alaska Range and in the mountains like the Chugach and the Talkeetnas, as well as up along the Brooks Range. Cooler temperatures for the weekend over the mainland, and another push of showers and some rain toward the Panhandle as we go through the next few days. A little wetter than what it has been. So looking at winds, variable winds 5 to 10 knots within the inner channels of the Panhandle on Friday, waves running a couple of feet. The outer coast, south-southwest winds, Sitka southward at 10 knots. East winds outside of Gustavus and Yakutat Bay at 10 knots with swells of 4 to 5 feet. Saturday, winds will be southerly 10 to 15 knots within the inner channels, and waves 2 to 3 feet for those inner channels. For the outer coast, southwest to south winds Sitka southward at 15 knots and swells 5 feet. Those winds turn more easterly outside of Yakutat Bay to Cape Suckling at 15 knots and 4-foot swells. Across the northwest Gulf, variable winds 10 knots within Prince William Sound and outside of Hinchinbrook entrance. Strongest winds will be Lower Cook Inlet, where westerly winds upwards of 30 knots with 8-foot swells. On Saturday, we'll see those winds at 25 knots out of the west there across Lower Cook Inlet with 6-foot swells. And as we go up the inlet, mid and upper sections, 10 to 15 knot winds with 3-foot waves. East winds 15 knots within Prince William Sound and outside of Hinchinbrook entrance. Variable to easterly winds at 10 to 15 knots. On Friday, Kodiak Island will see westerly winds 20 to 25 knots. And as we go down the length of the Alaska Peninsula, generally west winds around 20 knots, trying to turn back more toward the southwest and even variable at 10 knots there outside of Falls Pass within the nearshore waters. Highest wind and waves will be in the vicinity just south there of Bristol Bay, where we see some 9-foot waves. And then Saturday, that trend continues because a cold front pushes just southeast of the area. Look for westerly winds, Kodiak Island 20 knots, 20 to 25 knot winds extending down along the Alaska Peninsula, swells 3 to 5 feet on the North Pacific side, but 4 to as much as 5 and 8 feet just outside of Bristol Bay and just there to the northwest of Port Huyden. The Aleutian chain on Friday will see generally northeast winds 10 to 15 knots, eastern central Aleutians, kind of variable winds west of Adak, turning back to the southwest 15 knots, Kiska to Shemya. And then on Saturday, look for northwest winds 15 knots around Dutch Harbor. Variable winds 10 knots Nikolsky, and then they turn back to the south 15 knots Atka and Adak, picking up to 25, even 35 knot southerly winds to the west there of Kiska and south of Shemya. For the west coast or southwest coastline, winds will continue generally westerly 20 to as 25 knots there coming into Hooper Bay. Swells running 6 to as high as 7-9 feet just outside of Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays. West winds 15 knots with 6 to 7 foot swells from St. Matthew down through the Pribilofs. And then Saturday, look for north winds within Norton Sound, 15 knots, northerly winds along the northern Yukon coast, 20 to 20 knots, just turning more northwesterly through the Atoll and Strait, and then northwest winds 20 to 25 knots there, Bristol Bay and Kuskokwim Bays. And then finally, looking at areas along the western Seward Peninsula, north side of St. Lawrence Island, generally north winds 20 to 25 knots on Friday. Brisk 25-knot winds through the lower Chukchi Sea with swells 4 to 7 feet. Up along the Arctic coast, winds will be northwest to west, strongest 20 to 25 knots, Prudhoe Bay to Kaktovik with 4 to 6 foot waves. And then on Saturday, we're looking at westerly winds along the Arctic coast at 20 knots. Look for 20-knot northwest winds off of Wainwright, Point Hope, and then turning northerly through the Bering Strait at 20 knots, with swells generally running 5 to 6 feet along the west side of the Seward Peninsula to the north side of St. Lawrence Island.